which then that's another. So I don't know.
Well, I kind of like.
Right, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Maybe I'll just.
But then I'm like.
Maybe just. It was just really good to hear, like, it's important. I mean, I know it is, but I just need continually to hear. Important information. And to hear people like, they're about Sarah Page and they're about. See any results for long, you know, like that. It takes a lot.
Like it's okay to see what.
Yeah.
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 I just realized that oh no, I didn't either. Yes, I do. I do have my microphone on, so we're starting and right. But I do want to say also that because that was a really interesting conversation that you all were having. Yeah, you are. No, that's absolutely true. So and Autumn's signing on here in Zoom, so oh gosh, you know what I didn't do. Okay, one thing.
Are you you're in the last version? Yeah. Yeah, when did you start?
It's been a few weeks, but I would
Okay.
also, so
Yeah.
it's on a little bit slower.
Yeah, and easy to.
Yeah.
Give
So-
yourself grace, because I did not know how to do that.
Yeah, that's the advantage, I guess. I don't have another job and I'm trying to juggle.
Mhm.
It's nice, but I also.
See, that's the-
Yeah. I would love to jump in feet first if I had the money saved back that I could do
But
that.
I don't know if we have, I mean.
Yeah.
We'll see. So far, we're doing okay, though. I
Yeah.
feel like. I think,
Yeah, I would,
might
yeah.
start subbing
I would love to put my job more
and be in full time.
and then just do it.
Then I hear most of you have like a side income. I got it made. I really do. I hate this.
Do you have? Sorry.
No, that's all right. That's okay.
Okay.
So good morning, Autumn, who's joined us, and I think she's at work, so she rarely jumps in, but she's got her screen on. And for those of you that will be seeing this on, oh, she says good morning, right? For those of you that will be watching this on Facebook later too, I had my microphone on because, you know, it's Wednesday. I can't even blame this on Monday morning, but it's Wednesday. Traffic was awful, so I was running late coming in. And I hope that you heard a little bit of the conversation. I'm so lucky to have 3 people in here with me live this morning. I have Serenity, Laura, and last but not least, Jody. And so it's very exciting to have actual people in here. And they were just having a conversation about being new agents. And, you know, what I was really concentrating on what I was doing, but one I heard was, you know, it was encouraging to hear other agents that have been through this whole process, that not hitting the road, you know, running right away, that it took some time. It does. We want our whole goal in launch is to get you all productive, because, you know, it's nice to eat and it's nice to pay your bills, right? All that stuff. So, but realistically, and I hope that all of you had a conversation with Kristen, because I know that Kristen is very upfront about this and tries to make the point very clearly that, you know, sometimes it does happen right away and sometimes it doesn't. It's really important to have that nest egg, you know, kind of there, a little bit, or, you know, second income in the family, if you're that fortunate, you know, that kind of thing. Cause that's what I had, you know, it certainly took me a while to get my business going. You know, back 40 years ago, there were fewer people buying and selling houses. That's not true. That's not true. Dinosaurs didn't buy many houses. But I had the, I don't know who this is. They're just identified as iPhone. So we will find out who this is. They have to talk to us. That's right.
Hello, are you talking about iPhone 293?
Yes, that's you.
It's me, it's Olgi.
Oh, hi, Olgie. Okay, all right. So it's Olgie. She's joining us.
Hey,
She's joining us this morning too. So you're missing the party here in the classroom, Olga. So Serenity, Laura, and Jody are all in here with me this morning. So, but
Oh my gosh.
glad, but we're glad you're here too. So
Darn it, the one time I'm not there.
I know,
Aw.
because Olga's been in here by herself
Aw.
before too, so. All right, so I promise you, we will get actually started, but I do, and the accountability, just the conversation, so that's why I encourage all of you to train, to come to as many trainings as you possibly can. I know a lot of you are working other jobs. Come to Wednesday Night Warriors if you possibly can. That's a kind of a little different mix of people, because we do tend to get people in the evenings that do work a daytime job. Just for the, if nothing else, it's just for the community that you have. You're all going through the same thing, right? You may be at a, few weeks difference in there, but you're all going through the same thing. So it is the community that we try to build here. Accountability is also another thing that I think is very important. I've had an accountability partner. I can't say my entire career, because I didn't the first few years. It was, that guy at home that was my accountability partner, but again, a business accountability partner. And I'm even going to say some of you that are on a team, because, that applies to a couple of you that are here this morning, someone outside of your team. Your team is an accountability partner, absolutely, and your team leader, but also someone outside of that too. Number one, you sometimes get a little bit of different perspective coming into it. And, again, someone that's kind of on the same experience level as you are, I think is very beneficial too. So, all right. So I wasted enough time, because we were also going to take our break. So it's about 9:19. So I should probably actually get started with what we're talking about this morning. And so this is the first Wednesday of our contracts class schedule here. So today is the listing agreements and buyer agency agreements. I am working a little bit ahead of the office. I just found out yesterday that I'm supposed to go to a training for the new forms, and I already talked about the new forms on Monday. So, you all, you all are there. But I also think that really kind of shows. I saw them. I received. Lynn sent me a copy of them last week, and so they're simple enough. There's some major changes. I'm not going to say that. There's some major changes going on in our forms, but honestly, there should not be major changes in the way you're doing your business. This is just a reflection of some agents, not those of you here. Some agents over the years have not been completely transparent about the way commission was spent and shared, and representation. But since the early to mid 1990s, oh, okay, now on it. Okay, so now I'm getting Olga on a second device here. Okay. All right. Both states, Kansas and Missouri, have had the brokerage disclosure forms that we are required to give to all parties with whom we have a substantial conversation about real estate. And so that's any personal information or financial information. And so, that's been required for years and years and years and years and years. So why is there now still that question out there in the public? Because agents didn't do their job, right? Right? Don't ever just send something to someone for their signatures. Tell them what they're signing. People don't read things for the most part. There are certain personality types that do. And if you're working with one of those, be prepared for the time that they spend doing that. But don't ever, always, always, always. That's why I encourage you all to have a little cheat sheet for the buyer's agency agreement, for the listing agreement, and for the contract that has your thumbnail explanation out beside each paragraph, so that you can tell them what it is they're signing and that you understand it. No one expects you, I say this all the time. I know everybody gets tired of hearing when I say these. I don't expect you to memorize the forms. I don't have the forms memorized. Lynn doesn't have the forms memorized, but we know what the paragraphs say and we know what the intent of it is. And if I do need the specific wording from something, I know exactly where to go. And we want you all to be on that exact same level. That's not brokerage level, that's agent level. All right, you should know exactly what the forms say and exactly where they say it. So, All right, down off of your soapbox then. But really, that's very important to me personally. It's very important to your broker. It's very important to your clients. It should be very important to you. All right, so we are going to then, because I didn't see any need in going over the old forms, because as of August 14th, we've got to start using the new forms. A lot of you have that may be watching this later. Well, I know some of you already have gone through some of the forms and are kind of familiar with our current forms, but a lot of you won't be signing anything with a client or customer and see, I'm going to start using that word too, a client or customer until after August 14th. So why should I talk about the old forms when we've got the new forms available? And it's still not sharing. Give me one more second here. It's sharing for Zoom. It's just not casting in here.
It knocks it off. Like
I-
when we're in meetings, it's like,
Okay.
I'm not, the internet sometimes just tired.
The internet gets tired.
It's
I love that. I'm gonna start using that one.
Tired.
Oh my goodness.
You know, and that's true, because then sometimes it'll start showing up in one of the other.
Yeah, I've heard of, yeah, someone else
Rooms.
is trying to get on the access and stop your,
Right.
I know when I was learning the system, I had. Probably not a few people all on that too.
Still not.
Yeah.
One more second. I'm gonna try it one more time. I know the people on Zoom are seeing it. But the one time that I have people here in the room and it won't cast. I'm just not gonna pick it up. I got it shown over in the Brookside somewhere.
Someone else is doing the same.
I'll do the laptop so I can pull it up and see.
There it is. We'll see how long that lasts. No, yeah.
That way I'll have it.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. I see what you're doing. All right.
It's not casting in the room.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
Bring the email that she sent out. This is my admin. So,
Okay. So I've got it on here and
I'm sorry. I can-
it's in the classroom. All right. We'll see. We'll see if we can kind of muddle through this. All right. So the first one that I want to talk about, because it's a brand new form, our limited service transaction broker agreement. We know the term as transaction broker. Oh, and Alicia's coming in too. All right. We know the term transaction broker because of our pre-license class, right? Everyone knows what transaction broker means, I hope. Anybody here in the classroom want to give me just a 3 words, or that maybe is 4, 5-word explanation of what a transaction broker is? Anybody up to that?
Person that- Both sides of the deal?
Try it the other way.
There's one side?
One more way. Right, transaction broker.
Oh.
Right, now, but let's talk about the word serve, because I think that might have been where Laura was going with that. A transaction broker, by definition, does not represent any party in the transaction. We are assisting both parties or one party. So, and you will notice that in our contract and some of the addenda that we use with our contract, the phrase the licensee assisting the seller or the licensee assisting the buyer. Oh, and Serenity's joining me too. Okay, great. Everybody's, going the second route in case something does go sideways here, so. So it's, and that can be someone who is representing that party, or it can be someone who is not representing that party. NAR rules now tell us that we have to have some kind of agreement with the buyer before we show any property as of August 17th. That's the rule. No reason not to start that right now. You should have already been doing that. It's always been my philosophy and my way of doing business that I don't show, I'll put it this way, a lot of properties to someone that I don't have an agreement with. And prior to that, it was always a buyer agency agreement because we never really had a transaction broker agreement prior to this. But it's really important now because of the compensation part of it. We may be out there showing properties, at least for the next few months. I really kind of think all of this is going to shake out, honestly, and I'm not the only one that thinks that. But for the next few months, you may see a lot of listings out there that will say, well, no, the seller is not agreeing to pay compensation to the agent working with the buyer. So you need to make sure that you are taken care of. Yes, the agency agreement is the best way to do that. It's always the cleanest way to do that. When you're dealing with someone as an agent, you are representing their best interest, and you can certainly give your opinion and your advice and counsel. That's all part of being an agent. I think it's more difficult to work as a transaction broker or with an unrepresented party because we have to be really careful about what we say. We can't say anything that would give either party an advantage over the other one. So, transaction broker with no disclosures and your opinion doesn't matter. Don't say it. And advice and counsel. You can never, ever, ever give negotiating advice when you're working as a transaction broker. And even though, we're never supposed to give a price on a property. I hope everybody knows that too. And inevitably buyers will ask you, well, what do you think I should offer? And your answer to that always, even if you're representing them, should always be, I can't tell you that, I'm not looking at the property the same way you are, right? So, but here's what the numbers say, and that's where our market analysis comes in to be so influential and so important. The numbers say this, but buyer, you are the only one in the world that knows what that property is worth to you. So, we'll write it up for whatever you want. So that should always be your answer regardless. And can you still do that market analysis for someone you're not representing? Absolutely. It's factual information, right? Everyone should know what property sold for in a particular neighborhood if they're looking to buy there. So yeah, of course you can. All right, so getting back to the form. All right, we know it is transaction broker agreement. It's also, they've also got the limited service here, which two different ways of saying basically the same thing. We are not working as their agent. We are getting them through the process of buying a house. All right, because that's, go ahead.
So instead of doing, representing them, you could do.
Absolutely.
that
There, you
instead
won't.
If they don't want to sign.
Exactly. And Jody's asking, so in case they don't want to sign something, that's what this is for. That's exactly right. He took the words right out of my mouth. You will always run into people that are hesitant about signing a buyer agency agreement. And this form is just for the buyer side. For whatever their reasoning is. I find it a little bit difficult to understand. Why wouldn't you want to be represented? I guess it's, more of the, well, now I'm tied to one person kind of thing. And I guess I get that.
If you're an investor, maybe.
That's it. Laura said, maybe if you're an investor, yeah, that's true. Investors probably know lots of real estate agents, and we are to an extent somewhat limited. I don't want to get completely off the rails here, but we do have, the private office exclusive possibility here, which means that an agent in our office, a salesperson in our office may have a listing that they can't advertise to the public. And that's what a POE, private office exclusive, absolutely means. We cannot in any way, shape, or form advertise it outside of our brokerage. And so if I'm working with an investor, those are listings that I know of that no one else knows about that I can tell him about, but every brokerage around the city has that same possibility. So yes, there may be people that don't want to tie themselves to one. That is probably the one way that I do understand a buyer being hesitant to sign an agency agreement. All right, so now let's get to the limited service transaction broker agreement. And so these are the mechanics of filling this out. I don't have my cheat sheets yet on these forms. I'm imagining that these are going to be the ones that we will start using on August 14th. I would imagine that there are going to be changes made to all of these new forms by the end of the year as we get them out into the real world and working with them, things work out. So I'm sure that there will be changes, and we don't have our internal forms at all yet. I still haven't talked with Lynn about this, but I would imagine that we're going to wait a few months to see how these new forms shake out before we do make the changes to our internal forms. So this is a KCRAR form. Everyone knows that because their logo is up in the top left-hand corner. And so the mechanics of filling this out. So we're going to go through it pretty much line by line, since this is a brand new form here. This agreement is made between, and then we have our blanks there for the buyer, indicate marital status. Even though this is going to be an internal form, for the most part, only between you, the broker, and the buyer. There may be times when this will be given to MLS or KCRAR. There may be times that we have to prove that we have it to an outside party. So I'm going to back off for the time being of saying that these agency agreements are only among the three parties, because again, that's one of the things that might shake out here. So, but so what we want here, just as we do on all buyer agency agreements, on any buyer agreement, is we want their full name the way that they're going to want it on the contract. So make sure this is the best place for you to have it and to have reference. If it's someone that you are pretty sure you're going to be putting into your customer care database, other people call it database, I call it a customer care list, into your customer care or database, then you probably don't want them in there as Robert and Elizabeth. You probably want Bob and Betty. So this is the one place that it's really good for you to have their full legal name, middle initial, if there's a suffix that either one of them want to use, that kind of thing. Same thing if it's an LLC or a corporation or a partnership, any kind of company that is also going to be in whose name the property is going to be. We don't need it. But if it is a company and there are people signing on behalf of that company, it's good to let them know that they will have to provide the paperwork that authorizes them, that proves that they are authorized to sign on behalf of that company. We don't necessarily need it. It's great if you can get it into your files, but the title company definitely will. So it's a good time to just prepare them for that we're going to need it. All right, so buyer's name, and then on line 3, we have the broker's name. Once we get our internal forms, that will be pre-printed for you. Oh, just lost it here in the classroom. It'll be pre-printed there for you, but on the KCRAR forms, you will have KWN Kansas City Metro LLC. KWN Kansas City Metro LLC. That's how your broker's name needs to show up. I'll try it again and see. KWN Kansas City Metro
Spelled out.
LLC.
That's gonna be what you said.
Oh, good. Oh, thank you. All right. Yes.
Oh, where it says broker, okay, follow.
Oh, on the broker. Oh, I thought you were where to find the forms. So I forgot. Yeah, see, it didn't take. This is just going to be a problem for me. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time doing this. Nope, not going to do it. Well, maybe it will. It might be Zoom too, because it keeps kicking me off of that as well. Okay, but let me, so I'm not going to answer the question that Serenity asked because I thought she was asking a different question. Where do we find these forms? In Loop, they are in the KCRAR templates. They're not in there yet. So if you need one, most of the ones that I have here are just training forms. They're all watermarked as training forms. So don't worry about using this until after August 14th. But I would imagine that they're going to be in their own template folder in Loop. They're not at this point going to be mixed in, but I could be really wrong about that. Okay. All right, then line number 4, the purpose of this agreement is for the broker to consult with buyer regarding specific properties. Down here. And assist buyer in locating and touring properties. Buyer and broker agree they are entering into a non-exclusive relationship. Under the agreement, broker will be acting as a transaction broker and shall not be an agent or advocate of the buyer. So this is an open listing, right? As a transaction or limited services, they can sign this same agreement with another broker. If they are under an exclusive buyer agency agreement with another broker, we cannot do this. Right? So make sure that you've clarified with them. Have you signed anything with anyone else? What was it? And if you can see a copy of it, that would be awesome. Because if it's an exclusive buyer agency agreement, we cannot contract with them also. So if they've signed something else like this or an open or non-exclusive agreement. General description on line 9 of the property. Buyer desires to purchase real property described as, we have our residential, we have our income, we have our vacant land, we have our commercial, other could be vacation property, but other kinds of things, vacant land, I always kind of interpret that here, and again, this is just Linda's interpretation, as a lot to build on. If someone's buying big land, if that's what they're looking for, hundreds or thousands of acres, that's a whole different, it's not that our agreement here is not different, but it's a whole different offer process, different paperwork. Commercials, different paperwork too. So, but also, this is also where I like to kind of throw in here. Remember to stay in your lane. All of you are just learning residential. All right, so that's great. You have a whole team of launch coaches here to help you get through residential. And income can fit into that too if it's a residential income property. Once we start getting into apartment complexes, retail, any kind of commercial, for business or for income, if you're talking about a big land purchase, that's a whole different animal, and that's different training that you're going to get. I know that Jody in here has expressed that he's really kind of hoping to get into the investment kind of thing, which is, again, residential and commercial both fit into that investment kind of property. You don't know enough about commercial to do a commercial transaction. I can tell you that right now. We have a wonderful launch coach that specializes in commercial. You don't know enough about land to sell a piece of vacant land. And that I would even say that goes so far as a building lot. So always, always, always look for help. There is absolutely nothing wrong. And in fact, I think one of the strongest things that we can ever say in our business is, or two, I'll put it in 2 here. Number 1, I don't know the answer to that question, but I know where to find out the answer. So I'll get back to you. And number 2, I don't know very much about that, but I know people who do. So I'm going to bring them in and work with us, right? Rick Halterman here, we have several commercial groups here in the office. Rick Halterman comes in and talks with my pre-licensed class almost every month and offers his services. I think I haven't talked with all of them, but I think most of the commercial groups here in the office would be happy to pay a referral fee. That can be worked out between the 2 parties there. I know that but I also know that Rick will also make that a sliding fee there. If you want to start learning commercial, he will let you shadow him. He'll take you through every step of the process along with him. He will, of course, be paying you less on the referral for that because you're taking his time and expertise. So that's only fair. So learn it. I'm not telling you not to learn it. I'm telling you right now, you don't know enough to do it. So always seek out that additional help. All right, then we have on line 12, our general location of the property. I don't think that you can be too broad here. In fact, I encourage you to say the Kansas City general metro area. Don't narrow yourself down to a city. Certainly don't narrow yourself down to a neighborhood. We'll talk about that when you're working on this line, the general location, because I can't tell you how many buyers start out in one place and end up on the other side of state line. Just because, you know, they don't know the market and they'll find better deals on the other side or more of what they're looking for. So just don't narrow yourself down. Make sure that you're providing both brokerage disclosure forms, regardless, even if they tell you, I will only buy on the Kansas side. I will never buy a Missouri property. Guess what? So make sure you're also providing that the Missouri brokerage disclosure form. So that's if we're checking the general location box, and then our approximate price range. Again, don't be narrow yourself down too much here. You can start at 0. Never, ever, ever, ever put anything here that's higher than the pre-approval letter that you have from a buyer. And yeah, don't show any buyer, whether you're representing them or not, don't show them anything unless you have proof of funds or pre-approval letter, but never put anything higher there. And in fact, it's a really great time to prove your value by having the conversation with them. If they haven't already talked with their lender about what that $450,000 pre-approval letter, what that payment's going to look like. If the lender hasn't already talked to them about that, you do it. Make sure that you do it. They may not be comfortable spending that much on a monthly basis on their payment. And so maybe we really should just be looking in the 350 range, even though they've got the 450 pre-approval. So again, proving your value there, you know what you're doing. So, but never go above the pre-approval or proof of funds on line 14. It's the only way to limit yourself there. On line 16, this is very different from anything that we've dealt with before, actually printed on a form. We've been able to do this all along, but property addresses. So you will, here's the thing, and here's why this form will become, I think, pretty important in our business. Yes, Serenity has a
Sorry,
question.
going back to line 14, I know it was really simple, but when we bought our house, we were pre-approved for 200, but we could have went up more, so we ended up buying a house for almost 300. So say our agent did the 200, because it wasn't until we looked at the 200s that we're like, oh no.
This isn't gonna work.
Not what I need in my life. So I got a little excited. So I would have just had to re-sign a agency.
Great question. So Serenity is asking, and because this happens all the time too, you'll get a pre-approval letter for, and we'll use Serenity's example for 200,000. So that's what the agent will say, that's why we write it up for. But then that buyer's not finding what they're looking for. They get a new pre-approval letter, getting them up to 300. Absolutely, sure, that happens all the time. What do we do? There's a change form for that, right? So you would just, right. So we just ask that we adjust that, and on the change form, the price range, and ask the seller to re-sign, right? And if you don't think about doing it when it happens, compliance will remind you, right? So yeah, so you'll always get that note too, that your purchase price doesn't match your buyer agency agreement or your buyer agreement. All right, great questions. So that's why I love having people in the class, because I know people out there in Zoom land also have questions, and sometimes they're hesitant to ask. So I do always check at breaks to see if anyone's posted anything. All right, so on line 16, specific property addresses here. I know this is going to start happening to all of us. That a buyer will say, okay, yes, I'll sign this with you, but only for these particular properties. We've been doing that all along. It's just it was a little trickier because we didn't have the specific lines to do that on here. So absolutely perfectly fine. As we get to the dates of this too, nobody cares what the dates are on your, how far in the future this agreement goes. Only you and the person signing it care about that. Same thing here. If it's just for one, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 addresses, that's perfectly okay. We have the ability to do that now. All right, the term of the agreement, as I said, we would get to the dates here. Term of agreement for a period beginning. So we put, there's no reason not to put today's date, whatever date you're filling this out here, because in parentheses, we have our explanation here, or the date of the last signature, whichever is later. So don't try to guess what day everybody's going to sign it. Just go ahead and put today's date in here. And then when it gets signed, and remember it says last signature. We don't want you to be the last one signing it. This is you don't, yeah, you do sign it. I was gonna say you don't, but you do sign it. So make sure that you sign it before you send it off for everyone else's. We don't want it hung up on you that you forgot to sign it. So date of last signature is would be our effective date or the date that we put in there. This agreement shall continue through 11:59 PM on, and then we have a blank there and there's no default there. So again, nobody cares. Is it for 1 day, 2 days? Fine. Is it for a year? Fine. Is it for 5 years? Fine, right? No, so nobody cares. Just you and the person signing it. That's a negotiable term there. All right. Unless of course terminated by the broker. I don't always point this out, but I will now. All of our agreements, our buyer agreements and our listing agreements, all are written in favor of the broker. It says unless terminated by the broker, right? Now, does that mean that a buyer can never terminate this? Of course, it doesn't mean that. Right? Because it's by mutual agreement. If a buyer is terribly, terribly unhappy with their agent and call Lynn and to say, I don't want to work with this person anymore. I don't want to be tied up on this agreement anymore. Lynn is not going to force them to stay with us, right? Okay. Now, a listing can be a little bit different, especially if it's or if the buyer's under contract. Then Lynn will say, oh, well, I'm sorry, but you know, if we already have a contract signed between a buyer and seller, you do have to stay with us. I understand though, I understand why you wouldn't want to work with Linda anymore. I wouldn't want to work with her either. So I'm going to assign you to Laura, sorry. So, or Lynn will take it on themselves. I've actually done that, you know, with my broker hat on too. So, all right. Okay, Laura's got a question.
Do you tell your buyer that? Like how, like, do you say?
Oh my goodness, no.
No, you don't say you can cancel it every time.
No.
Okay.
Well, what I do say, but great question, because what I do say to buyers and sellers both is going through the form and telling them now on the agency agreements, it's a little bit different on this one, but on the agency agreements, when I'm representing them, I do make the point that I am representing them. And I always point out in the forms that my fiduciary duties, or I just say them because, you know, you all learned those in pre-license class too, right? The confidentiality or the care, the obedience, the loyalty, disclosure, accountability, and confidentiality, right? Cold AC. Who in here learned it as old car instead of cold AC?
I think that was on my
That's a
stuff.
good acronym.
Oh, cold AC. Because everybody always wants cold AC. Okay, okay. Care.
Obedience,
Obedience,
loyalty, dedication,
disclosure,
disclosure. And
accountability, confidentiality. And old car works too, even though there's an R in there, and I'm not going to tell you what that means. It means reasonable care is really all that means. So I mean, it's the same thing, but I like cold AC because it separates the AC out, because those are the two that never, ever, 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 ever go away. We are always accountable forever, and we are always held to confidentiality forever. The others go away as soon as our agreement ends or they close on the property. You know, those other four go away. We don't always owe them loyalty, but we do always owe them accountability and confidentiality.
Confidentiality, I'm thinking like you close. But when I closed, I put a Facebook post with my client. Yeah, we closed. That like confidentiality?
No,
It's
not at
more
all.
Terms of.
The terms of the agreement, even though that kind of can become public too. Why they sold or why they're buying, their ability to, that the buyer would have paid more. You know, your buyers will tell you that. Say, well, I want to make the offer for $350, but I'd be willing to go up to $375. Right?
Details of the transaction.
Exactly,
But
details.
if I tell someone, like, I'm working with a client now that my family knows who they are, but I haven't told them because my mom likes to like this. I don't know if that happens to the public, you know what I mean? But once it closes, then I say, yeah, I want, I guess if I close.
Of course, absolutely. Yes, of course. Oh, and Laura's bringing up good points too about the confidentiality part. I hear this all the time. And I had to get on to my husband about it too. If you're working with people You can certainly talk in generalities with whoever about working with a client. Don't ever give names and don't ever give details. Um, uh, because you never know, Kansas City is a small community.
Yeah.
And you never know who knows who out there. So yes, and so Laura's bringing up the point. She's not telling her family that she's working with someone that her family knows, right? Because yeah, I could see that happening too. My mother would have wanted all the details.
Yeah.
So, right. So, yep. Great questions, but yeah, all about confidentiality. All right. So, all right, terms of the agreement, I think I probably beat that one to death there. So, all right. Paragraph number 4, brokerage disclosure required by law. Buyer acknowledges the receipt of, oh, look at this, it's right here in print. It's always been in our agency and in our agreements. It's been in our agency agreements, but now it's really perfectly clear here, right? That you are, and I would say, check both boxes and share both of those disclosures. Neither disclosure requires the buyer's signature. Even though the Kansas disclosure does have a space for it, they can sign it, but it's not required. The ones that we provide for you have on the Kansas have David's signature on them and a place for you to sign it. So you definitely sign it, but the buyer does not have to. And Missouri doesn't want anybody signing it. Right? They don't want us messing with their forms, but that one will be filled out the way that your broker wants. So make sure, again, you'll find those blank forms in KCRAR, but our internal forms and our KW and KC templates in .loop are already filled out for you. And those are the ones we want you to use. And again, I just suggest that you use both of them here.
So you're saying on the Missouri broker disclosure form that they don't want like signatures in there?
They don't.
If you do, is that like
I don't think anybody would throw you in real estate jail for doing that.
Kind of like black and white. So to me, I might forget the Kansas one, and I don't want to forget. They need signatures on the Kansas one. Is that what you're saying?
They don't need signatures, but
They
they can sign it. There's a space for them, but it's
Got
not
it. It's
required.
really just us presenting. This is the evidence of us presenting.
Well,
But they've seen it.
this is the evidence that you have every intention of them seeing it. But the best thing, okay, two bets. So great questions here in the personal, in our personal room here. All right, so sharing it in .loop is fine. That's all you have to do. If you share it in .loop or DocuSign, that means that it was presented to them.
Okay.
We do say in our agreements that it's required reading. Well, I'm not gonna go make sure that they read it, but it does say that it is, so be sure you point that out. But so you will occasionally be in situations where people either, number one, don't want to use .loop or DocuSign, don't want to do electronic signatures. There are those people out there. Or you're kind of in the heat of the moment. You just met someone at an open house and now you're going through this process with them. I would absolutely ask them to initial a copy. That's why I always bring paper copies with me. In my attaché, what do I want to call that? My carrying case. I have multiple copies of both. I have copies of everything because I'm a paper person, but I have multiple copies of both Kansas and Missouri. So then when I'm having that in-person conversation with them and not sending them anything yet through .loop, I tell them what the form says, tell them they can read it, but most of them will just, kind of blankly look at it. So again, explain what it says, that they can be represented. They don't have to be. The other party in the transaction may be represented. All of that will be disclosed in a contract. And what representation means, again, giving those fiduciary duties. And then I will slide a copy over to them and say, this is your copy to keep, but would you mind initialing this copy of this that I can keep in my files? That's my evidence that we had this conversation. And in pre-licensed class, I always give the kind of I hope I scare people just a little bit. That's kind of my intent. Because if you are ever, I'm not going to say necessarily in front of a judge, some judges would probably ask this question first off, but I know that KREC would, and I know that KCRAR would, if a complaint is ever lodged against you by a buyer, one of the very first questions that buyer is going to be asked is, well, did you receive, and especially if it has anything to do with representation, did you receive the brokerage disclosure brochure in the state of Kansas? And I can tell you what that buyer's answer will be. I don't remember seeing anything like that, right? And so you have to have your evidence, right? So that's why it's important. So see, and people that came through class with me know this, and I'm sure all three of you are learning this. Linda doesn't give short answers to questions.
I like it though.
There's- I always have to give a background.
Yeah.
All right, and I do always circle around to the answer. All right, buyer representation. Buyer warrants that buyer is not currently obligated under any exclusive buyer agency contracts, right? So make sure that you are asking that question. Buyer warrants that buyer is not aware of any facts that would prevent buyer from closing any sale entered into under this agreement. They don't have plans on quitting their job in the next 3 days. You know, whatever's might be going on. Buyer agrees to comply with all applicable federal, state, and local laws, rules, and regulations and ordinances, including fair housing and civil rights statutes and rules and regulations. You know, don't bother asking me to, you know, to try to discriminate against any of the fair housing, protected classes. And you know, you'd be surprised some of the things that buyers say. And most of the times the things that you can just kind of glide over, but most of the times it's not. And if they ask you things like, oh, you know, I hope you all learned this in your pre-license or in the fair housing classes that you've taken subsequently, that we cannot ever say what a good neighborhood is, what a safe neighborhood is, what a good school district is. You know, stay completely away from those questions. And the easiest way to do that would be first, because buyers will say that, and they don't have any nefarious thoughts about it. They're just, well, is this a safe neighborhood? Well, I don't know how to answer that, buyer, because I don't know what your definition of safe is. It's probably very different from mine. But what I can do is direct you to, and most of the cities here in the metropolitan area have really great police report parts on there, either on the city website or on the police department website, where they get, you know, numbers of police calls and all that kind of stuff. So all of that information is there. Our contract gives the contact information for both Kansas and Missouri for the sexual offenders registration list, how they can get that. So I don't know what their definition of a safe neighborhood is or a good neighborhood. Certainly don't know what their definition of a good school district is, because it's probably very different from mine. And so that's the easiest way to get out of that.
That's true. I feel like I had that with it prior. Didn't feel safe for that. And I'm like, this is great. But I've lived in a much more unsafe neighborhood.
Right.
And she's single.
Right,
Different
right.
situations.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yep, yep. All right. So and again, a lot of buyers aren't asking that in any kind of way, but you'll be surprised some of the things that do come out of buyers' mouths. And there are some things that you do have to say, well, that would be a violation of federal fair housing laws for me to do that. Okay.
Language.
I mean, if they-
I like
Scripts are wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I can't say that because,
Right,
you know.
right.
Violation.
Yep.
Yep. It's an everyday conversation. If I thought it was conversation.
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Once me and my husband have two different definitions of safe, so like we
Yeah.
can be on the same page.
Oh,
like-
right. Yeah. For those of you on Zoom, right. Serenity said, my husband and I have two different, very different definitions of what safe is, right? Yeah. Precisely. All right. Buyers shall attempt to secure written loan pre-approval and disclose to broker the status of buyer's loan approval, and shall provide a copy of current loan approval documents, including all conditions and limitations required by a lender. That would only not apply if the buyer's paying cash. And then we also need proof of funds. So that applies to that. Which I think they should add into here. Yeah, it's not there. Yeah. One of my notes to Lynn. All right. Lynn, and for those of you, and I'll put this out here too, because apparently there is a little bit of a disconnect here. Yes, agents have had input. Agents have had input on these forms. Absolutely, they have. Direct input, yeah, because we have Lynn Weymouth, our supervising broker here, has been on the forms committee at KCRAR for years. So if you ever have any questions or complaints about the forms, go to Lynn about that. You should be anyway, because she's our broker, right? She's a supervising broker. Absolutely. Come to me, come to Kristen, take it to David. We all want your input. And those are open committees. if you feel really strongly about anything at KCRAR, I hope everyone knows here that there are committees that run KCRAR that take care of all of these things for us, that come up with the new rules and regulations we have to abide by. So I really, really kind of twerks me a little bit when I hear people complaining. It's like, oh, well, why didn't you bring that up at the last meeting? All right. Okay. All right. Back off of my soapbox again. So yes, I do have that in my notes to Lynn. That we need to address the proof of funds. Buyer agrees to inform all real estate licensees and sellers with whom buyer comes in contact that buyers are party to this agreement. That that is in bold, so that must be pretty darn important, right? All right, so always, and this pertains to, again, this transaction brokerage agreement. I always tell all of the buyers I start working with, there's no way I can be with you all the time. When you see a property that you want to see, when you're driving around, or on running your errands on Saturday or Sunday, and you see an open house, yes, text me and let me know. If I can meet you there, I'd be happy to, but I may be doing something else also. But here's a stack of my business cards. And I know a lot of agents don't even order business cards anymore, but I think this is the most important time to have business cards. Here's a stack of my business cards. When you go into those open houses, which you inevitably will, hand my card to that agent. They should ask you if you're working with someone, and just hand them my card. And they will probably be appreciative of it. I know I am when I'm in an open house. See, you all get to hear all of my scripts. I know I am when I'm in an open house, because I will take that information and immediately go text or email that agent that their clients came through my open house. And I appreciate knowing that too. But if you all will just text me and let me know that you're there, then, I'll contact that agent anyway. But here's a stack of my cards. All right. Broker's obligations. A transaction broker is responsible for performing the following. We protect the confidences of both parties, exercise reasonable skill and care, present all offers in a timely manner, keep the parties fully informed, account for all money and property received, assist the parties in complying with the terms and conditions of the contract, assist the parties in closing the transaction, suggest the parties obtain expert advice. Brokers shall comply with all applicable federal, state, and local laws, rules, and regulations and ordinances, including fair housing and civil rights statutes, rules, and regulations. So it all boils down to, again, what you probably should have learned if you didn't learn, or you probably don't remember is really what I should say, in your pre-license class. We owe those fiduciary duties, the loyalty, the obedience, the disclosure, full disclosure to our clients. On the other side of the coin, when we're working with anyone else, so we don't have an agency agreement with, we have to be fair, we have to be honest, and we have to be accurate. The fairness basically boils down to the fair housing rules and regulations, but then also what we do for one, we do for the other. So factual information, no opinions, no interpretation, but factual information such as a market analysis. And here's the thing, I rarely do an actual market analysis for people I'm not representing, but what I do pull up is the MLS, usually either the thumbnail or just the single line. These are the houses that have sold in this neighborhood over the last year and the prices for which they sold.
So you don't do a market analysis if we're not in this one.
Only if I've done it for one party. Because again, what I do for one, in a transaction broker situation, what you do for one, you have to do for the other. So unless I've had a relationship with the other party already too, I rarely do an actual market analysis, because that is interpretation to me. My market analysis is. But MLS factual information I'll do for both. Okay.
The broker's obligations is more talking about transaction broker. The broker is our transaction.
Right. Oh, here we go. There you go. Right. All right. All agreements are between the broker and the party, right? You are representing the broker. You're an agent of your broker. Everybody remember that? So when it says broker here, it means you. Right. And being a transaction broker is the one and only time as a salesperson you can be referred to as a broker. And because you are working as a broker there, you're getting two parties together. Okay. All right. Great questions. I love it. All right. And if you all have these questions, guess who else is going to have all these questions? Yeah.
Watching.
The people signing this.
Oh, yeah.
That's where I was going. Right. Right.
Well, maybe you already answered it and I wasn't thinking.
That's okay. It's easy to fall asleep when Linda's talking. I understand.
but they didn't want to be represented, they wanted to do this.
Uh-huh.
So if they change their mind and they want to be represented by somebody else, by a different agent, can they do that, or is that a violation of what we just did here?
That's a great question. The buyer agency, okay, what Jody's asking is, so they've signed this with us, maybe another one, but now they've decided they do want to sign a buyer agency agreement with a different broker, not us. What happens with that's a great question, because our buyer agency agreement always will say up here in this, in subparagraph A up here, buyer warns that buyers not currently obligated under, and our agency agreement says under any other agent, any other buyer agreement. And so that's up to them then to let us know. We don't know what they're doing, right? And I wouldn't ask a buyer every time I talk with them, hey, have you signed anything with anybody else necessarily at this point? So that's up to them to understand what they're signing over here with that other broker and let us know, hey, I can't work with you anymore. Great question. Great question. All right. Number 7, limitation on obligations. As a transaction broker, the agent assists in the transaction by helping with paperwork, facilitating communications, and providing general information. However, they do not represent the buyer as a fiduciary. Oh, the fiduciary means agency, right? Right. When acting as the agent for one party, either buyer or seller, broker or an agent has duties and obligations, which includes utmost good faith, loyalty, and fidelity to that one party. So again, we're defining what agency is and telling this buyer, but we're not working like that with you, right? Transact, that's right. Here's the thing, I'll tell you another little thing, and oh gosh, this is longer than I thought it was, because we do, no, that's my fault. We didn't, this may be the only form we get through today, and that's okay, all right. A transaction broker assists the parties with real estate transaction without being an agent or advocate for the interests of any party to the transaction. Again, it's in bold, so it must be pretty important, and I think that says that pretty clearly. Transaction or limited services agent, we are not working for either party, we're working for the transaction. We're getting them through to a closing, all right? And so, yeah, another little script that I use sometimes when I have run across those people that were hesitant to sign a buyer agency agreement with me, I would go show them a house or two. I might spend a couple of hours on a Saturday afternoon with them. That's as far as I would go. Because again, I'm afraid I'm going to say something that I shouldn't say that would imply agency, that I can't imply. That's illegal. So I'm a little concerned about, because, you know, Linda loves to talk. So I would probably say something that I shouldn't say. But in those first few, I am very careful. And in fact, I'm looking for an opportunity to say this. When they ask my opinion on something, I am right there with this saying, oh my gosh, I sure wish I could tell you what I think. I have so many very strong thoughts about this, and I would be happy to tell you, but I can't.
That was a much nicer response, and I gave another agent.
Oh.
He came to my open house, he's like, what do you think? I was like, well, first of all, I don't even make enough money to own this house. This is your opinion, because the way he went about it, so I was being really snarky, only because he was another agent.
That's
He
right.
was on the commercial side, so I wasn't worried.
That's all right. Serenity's saying that she had another agent come through an open house that she did that asked what her opinion was. And number one, she said, well, I don't even make enough money to own this house, so I can't have an opinion on it. But, oh yeah, another agent should have known better. We're not going to answer that question.
It was, I don't know, I didn't like his approach. Like, he let me go through my spiel when I'm really excited.
And then told
And
you.
then he like slips me a business card, like, get out of here. I was like, I gotta come back with something.
With something.
So
She,
you say, I wish I could tell you what I think, but I can't.
but I can't because I'm not your agent.
Because I'm not your, don't say like, well, I wanna say, you haven't signed with me, but that, I would love to know that, but, because I'm not your agent.
Because I'm not your agent, yes. And Chad Taylor, who here in this room is planning on going to the thing this afternoon? At downtown, the thing downtown. I can't remember what they're calling it.
Embrace the revolution.
Embrace the revolution. Okay, and it's an all afternoon thing. I think Chad is the first one talking, and I encourage anyone, and so that's for all of you here on Zoom too, that if you can ever go to any training that Chad Taylor offers, go. He is super smart. He knows what he's doing. He has the best ways of saying things. And so I have adopted, so kind of back up, Laura was asking for my clarification on, I can't tell you, this unrepresented buyer, I can't tell you what I think because I'm not your agent. Chad's verbiage for that, and I use this one, most of the time when I'm dealing with sellers that haven't signed with me yet, and they're asking my opinion on things, and I don't want to give it because I'm not going to give my exactly. Because Chad, and so I learned this from Chad. His way of saying this is, my clients that have signed agency agreements with me pay me a lot of money for that information, and they would be really angry with me if they found out I was giving it to you for free. And I love that. I have used that many times since I learned that from Chad. So
Put it on the farm.
exactly.
Like they would be in that.
Right, understandably, sure, understandably.
Question.
Oh, thank you. What is it?
So just to be clear, is transaction brokerage non-exclusive? Okay, would we need to mutually agree to end our transaction brokerage agreement if the customer later chooses to enter an exclusive agency with another person?
Okay, those two questions. Yes, it is non-exclusive, correct. It is, and we've not really had a good non-exclusive, we do have a non-exclusive buyer agency form, but so this is a non-exclusive agreement. I think Linda has to kind of backtrack here a little bit. We've always had a non-exclusive agency agreement, but that was still agency. And we only got paid if we were the procuring cause. This is different in that, yes, it is still non-exclusive. They can sign any number of these. We are not the only person that they can sign this with. And we are not representing them. Transaction brokerage limited services means no representation. And then the second question was,
Would we need
yeah.
to mutually agree?
yes. So then, yes. And thank you, Autumn, for asking these. And I was going to check it because we are going to take a break here in just a second. And I'll check for, I usually check for questions then, but so yeah, when we find out, when they come back and tell us that they've signed they've signed an agency agreement, an actual agency agreement, not another transaction broker. Trying to think how non-exclusive might fit in there. So another question for me to ask Lynn. Then yes, then we would do a change form or cancellation form of this. We would have to, but only because again, we're not going to know unless they come back and tell us. Okay, great
So
questions.
we're relying on them to tell us?
Mhm.
Oh, that's good.
The only other way that we're going to find out would be, and because this has happened too, when we've had buyers that didn't understand maybe what they were signing and maybe signed 2 agency agreements with 2 different brokers. So when one broker finds them a property and they go under contract, then that buyer goes and tells the other agent, when that agent calls and says, hey, I got this great property for us to go see. Oh, I'm already under contract. Oh, really? How did that happen? Well, the other agent I was working with. And so then sometimes that agent will call. And so then it's a matter of oh man, and I'm not even gonna go there.
Yeah, who signed first?
Who signed first,
And who
the
should-
procuring cause, all of that stuff.
So that's why it's
falls
so
in
important
there.
for us to be there. Let me know if you sign. Right,
Yes,
so that you don't get down the rabbit hole and
yes,
spend a lot of time only to find out.
that they are already obligated somewhere.
So they can have multiple of
That's
these.
They can
Like
have
not really
multiple of
stuff.
these because these are
Yeah,
non-exclusive,
not just.
Okay, I'm fine with it.
right? Now, when I say that, if we have particular addresses on here, not for particular addresses.
And not really.
We would be-
It's not gonna-
They shouldn't, even though, buyers shouldn't sign 2 buyer agency agreements. If we have them for specific addresses here, we are the agent for those addresses. Right? It's when we do the general location on this form that we might be opening ourselves up to. Yeah, so another agent helped me buy another house and there's nothing we can do about that.
But we still need to have the procuring cause now. Okay.
Yes. Yes. All right, folks. It's 10:16. Let's take a quick 5-minute break because we're gonna be done here at 11, but because we got started late. And so 5 minutes, I'll see you all at 10:21. so, yeah. All right, so we're back. And we're still on this one form. I bet that's the only one we're gonna get through today, which is fine. I'm good with that. No, I think I think it's great because this is an important one.
Add dates, not to next year.
Pardon me?
I have to add the dates to your.
I, don't tell Kristen now. Okay, all right, so. Matters that cannot be disclosed, paragraph number 8, because we got through the other one. Licensees acting as transaction broker shall not disclose any information or personal confidences about party to the transaction, which might place the other party at an advantage over the party unless the disclosure is required by law, or failure to disclose such information would constitute fraudulent misrepresentation. A transaction broker assisting the parties in any transaction regarding the sale or lease of real estate other than commercial property or residential property of more than 4 units shall not, underlined and bold, really important, disclose the following without the consent of all parties. A buyer or tenant is willing to pay more than the purchase price or lease rate offered for the property. A seller or landlord is willing to accept less than the asking price or lease rate for the property. What the motivating factors are for any party buying, selling, or leasing the property, or a seller, buyer, landlord, or tenant will agree to financing terms other than those offered. That's the exact same verbiage that's already in our agreements, right? What a transaction broker can and can't do. But let's go back up to that for just the first couple of lines of that for just a second. On line 59. Unless the disclosure is required by law or failure to disclose such information would constitute fraudulent misrepresentation. What are we talking about there? What kind of disclosures would be required by law? Well, yeah, yes, a physical or material defect of the property. What we define as something that might change a buyer's mind about buying the property. So any material defect about the property. And that includes anything about the title. If there's a cloud on the title, if there's an encumbrance that can't be taken care of. Anything that might change the buyer's mind about buying the property or how much they would pay for the property. Physical defect. If a seller has put sheetrock up in the basement to hide a crack in the foundation wall and we know about it. If the seller says, well, yeah, we have a roof leak, but it only leaks when it's raining really, really hard and the wind's blowing from the north. And we painted the ceiling so that, and we don't want you to tell. Well, of course we have to tell that, right? All right. Any physical or material defect of the property. All right.
Missouri is, you're
Oh,
supposed to know, right?
Oh,
Like, even if you
gosh.
don't know.
thanks for bringing that up. And yes, I can talk really about that in here. Missouri says anything that you know or should have known. Boy, that's a pretty high bar, isn't it?
Anybody have a license, like, and they're, seriously, like, and they're just supposed to know.
Sellers, like, because that's their liability.
That makes, no,
We're liable.
We're liable.
We're liable.
Yes, it's us. That's
Seller doesn't tell us though.
you're just supposed to know.
now, they do limit that to an extent. Really what the things that we should have known are things, especially things on public record, right? That because we know where to find public record. Things that we should know about zoning, about HOA restrictions and regulations, those kinds of things. No, they no. If we have never seen that, if we didn't sell the house to the seller and we don't know anything about the history of the house and it's a completely finished basement and the seller doesn't tell us that there are cracks in 3 of the 4 walls. No, is that something we should have known? No, they don't hold us to that. No,
But
things
stuff
that,
we can find out.
right,
Done
that we
due
know.
diligence. Like, when you get ready to list the house, you need to go through. That's one of your things you need to do is like check on the title and check on.
We don't typically check on title anymore. Interestingly enough, I just had a lunch agent in a situation where I told him it probably would behoove everyone to get what we used to call an ownership. We used to ask for title again back in dinosaur days because this is what the dinosaurs asked us to do. We would when we were taking a listing, we would get an ownership report on that, and that would kind of show us what liens were on it, all that kind of stuff. Encumbrances, I mean, we would pretty much get the preliminary title report at that point. And then when we were under contract, then they would pull anything that had happened in that interim. But we don't really do that so much anymore. But we do know where to find it, if it's an active HOA, should we find out what the rules and regulations are and make that public information?
Yeah.
Yeah, if we know that, you know, because there are those little strips of property, specifically, I'm gonna pick on, the Westport area, along Westport Road, we have one line of commercial, Westport Road is zoned commercial. The two streets along a lot of Westport Road on the north side and the south side are zoned mixed use. All right, everybody should know that. If you're going to be selling a property on that, yeah, the house next door can have a business out of it. Right? You may be using it as a house, but your two neighbors may be businesses. So those kinds of things, right? Yeah, they don't expect us to know if it's a haunted house, you know, if the kids in the neighborhood say that the witch lives there, you know, those kinds of things we can't be.
Even like if. Well,
No, right, no, no,
Well, I
no.
was thinking, like, if there's been like police activity at the house, like if someone died in the house, you know, like.
I don't think.
Right.
We have to dispose. of it?
Oh, golly, here we go. All right, and it's all, this is all applicable because
Yeah.
we're talking about disclosure. Do we have to advertise it that way? Absolutely, not, right? But I would absolutely make sure if it was something that I knew, if it's my listing and I knew that I'm working with the kids as an estate because their parent died in the property, right? No, we don't have to advertise that way, but I absolutely would. The minute anyone started being serious about it, another agent calls me because they've got a client interested in it, or in an open house, someone starts kind of giving me buying signals on that, I would absolutely tell them. Because that might make a difference to them, to that person.
So it wouldn't be like necessarily any disclosure. but
Oh,
something
gosh,
like-
no,
Yeah,
no.
Like when you say advertise, that's what.
Right, yeah, I'm not gonna put yes, there's not a question about that on our seller's disclosure. Our seller's disclosure is about factual stuff.
Yeah.
Right? And so, but because if I don't tell them, guess what's going to happen?
They're gonna find out.
The day they move in, that nosy neighbor that knows everything and is not only willing, but wants to tell everything they know, bringing over the plate of brownies, you know, oh,
And they're gonna be like, oh, you didn't tell me that. I
exactly.
wouldn't be here.
Exactly, because it might make a difference to some people, right?
And then, yeah.
And then, yes,
We
then
know
you'll be in
it's not
trouble.
gonna
Right.
happen.
So we're under no legal obligation in either state to disclose, and that's called a stigmatized property, right?
Yeah.
And actually, I mean, if you're working in the older parts of the city, find a house where someone hasn't died of
Right.
natural causes,
Right.
right? I mean, that happens every day. So literally every day. Now, if it was murder
Yeah,
or suicide,
yeah.
that's a little different. That I would disclose absolutely.
You would
Again, not
disclose.
advertising it.
Not advertising.
But
Just
yes,
say- just so you
absolutely.
know, like, just address the headline,
Yes, absolutely. And I would put it in writing somewhere.
that it had been disclosed.
Yeah. In an email, or, you know, or text, or however you're communicating with those people. It's like, okay, so yeah, all the things we talked about, and then, you know,
Yeah.
put that in there too.
Just so that you.
So you would put
Exactly.
it in like contract form and.
No. Oh, I see what, no, yeah, I said, yeah, I understand why you're asking that question. No, I would make a communication, a written communication somehow. Yeah,
Just to
but
the
not.
agent.
Or
Or
whoever,
the-
if it's a buyer, not a represented buyer especially, but yes, to the
The
agent is
would
great
be- it would
too.
Be their job to tell the buyer,
Exactly,
right?
all we have to do is tell the agent, right?
Okay, so don't put it like on the MLS or anything. It's one of those you just, when an agent calls, you just disclose.
If it, and again, only if they say, well, I've got a client that's interested, you know, the showing I had this
Yeah,
morning, they
okay.
made, you know, they're thinking about writing an offer. Yeah, I'm not gonna tell everybody that walks through.
Yeah,
Okay,
you just say, just say, I should probably let you know, or I.
Exactly.
just So you know.
Might make a difference to your buyer to know that, yeah. Yeah. So a crime is one thing, criminal
Yeah.
activity, if it's known as the drug house in the neighborhood and you know that, absolutely disclose that. Again, not in advertising, but every other way.
I can imagine like people coming by after you bought the house, looking for their drugs and. You got neighbors like, I don't know what.
Eh,
Oh, that would
Exactly,
happen.
exactly, right. All right, number 9, modifying brokerage relationship. Buyer agrees that if the broker is going to provide brokerage services beyond the limited services of this agreement, buyer and broker will enter into a new agreement for such additional brokerage services. Right, so if the buyer at some point decides, yeah, I do want your representation, then this gets canceled, we enter into an agency agreement.
We have to do a cancellation for that.
Yes, anytime we have a written agreement, we have to have a written cancellation of it. Yes, great question. Number 10, compensation to broker, what some agents probably will think is the most important paragraph in here, and it is important, I'm not minimizing it. Buyer acknowledges there are no standard compensation rates, and the compensation in this agreement is fully negotiable and not yet set by law, and not set by law. So this is showing up now on all of our forms, all of our documents that have anything to do with compensation. Our agency agreements, our listing agreements, and our contracts all have that exact sentence in there, so just get used to it. But again, this is one of those things that everybody should have been telling everybody all along, because there never has been a standard. It was absolutely illegal for there to be a standard compensation
I'll
rate.
put in the chat, sorry. I'm
Oh,
trying to be an admin.
that's fine. I appreciate it.
Autumn said not sure if you meant to be screen sharing, but she can just see your beautiful. No, she didn't say that, but just the camera feed. That's all she can.
Oh, like it's not the.
Yeah. Thanks, Autumn.
Thank you, Autumn.
So when it says broker, it means that.
Yes.
Broker.
Yes. Okay, there we go.
We are brokering.
Right, we are, right. That's exactly the way to look at it. Okay, so sorry, Autumn. All right, now you can see what we're talking about. Okay, compensation of broker. Buyer acknowledges there are no standard, oh, I already read that. Subparagraph A, broker shall be entitled to compensation for assisting in negotiating in the procurement of property acceptable to buyer. Broker's fee shall be. On line 79, this will be the one that you check. The amount of the compensation will be, and it can be a flat fee, it can be a percentage of the sales price. I think I kind of went over this on Monday. I would say if you're going to use percentage, I would say a percentage of the gross sales price. Because if, yes, I would. I'll double check with Lynn on that and I'll correct it myself if I need to, but that's what I would put. Because if we start trying to figure out, well, what's net, you know, at what point is that? Is that what we agreed to in our original contract? Is that just what the seller agrees to pay in the sales price minus what the seller's paying in buyer's closing costs? Or what about repairs that the seller does? Does that feed into the net too? So it kind of becomes a little quagmire there. So yeah, and again, nobody cares whether it's a flat fee or a percentage. Now, our brokerage here, and I can speak freely about this because you all in our brokerage does have a minimum that they want from a transaction. So and I'm not going to say what that is because that could change. I think I know what it is. So make sure that you're talking with Rochelle or Rebecca about the office policy on that. Well, I'll tell you what I think it is, what it's been for years, and I haven't heard that there was a change in this. They want whatever their split would be based upon a 1.5% commission rate. So they're not asking for much, right? And so if it's a $300,000 house, because you are given here, this brokerage, you are given an awful lot of leeway in the compensation that you charge to either a buyer or a seller, is whatever you're comfortable with. So whatever the sales price is, 1.5% commission that the broker would have received on that, and whatever their split of that would be. I think most of you are on a 70 or 70-30 split. Does that sound right? Okay. Oh, team members would be really different. Yeah. So you would have to talk with your team about that. But for those of you that are not on a team, so I think that I think that the broker receives 30 for most of you. I hope I'm saying this right.
I know when I signed in March, because we are in March, it's, I think like a 50, 60, 40 or something. I know, yeah.
60-40 probably reflects then also what launch gets from it. And the broker's only concerned about what they get.
Oh, okay, but I don't know. I don't even know what I did. Oh.
All right, let me put it this way. Yeah, I probably shouldn't have opened this up. So let me put it this way. if you're going to charge a flat fee or want to reduce your commission that you are charging to a client or customer, talk with Kristen
To make sure that you're. gonna-
or your team. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
right.
Yeah, they have to. go- they have-
Yeah. Yes. But I would say the teams, I know the brokerage, and I would say the teams give you some leeway in there. If you're listing your favorite uncle's house, you know, you might not be able to give him a break, you know, on that. So, right. And I will say too, that comparing then our brokerage to other brokerages in the city, a lot of other brokerage would say, well, we don't care what you charge them. We want our split, right? So whatever you are reducing it by comes completely out of yours, right? And our brokerage does not do that. So, all right, it comes, right, comes off the top.
So you said to put in there just X% of the gross. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
The
If you're
gross
doing a
price.
percentage,
Okay.
if you're doing a flat fee, just make sure that it hits whatever your team or brokerage has a minimum for. Again, nobody cares and nobody has ever cared whether it was a flat fee or a percentage. So
Nobody cares.
nobody cares. The only people that care are you receiving the money, right? And, right. All right, other compensation would be, and then we've got a special form for that coming up too. I'm probably not gonna get to today, but a retainer would be considered another fee. On a buyer side, I think it would be a little difficult. I need to go back up to line 79. Line 79 also needs to include your 495 or whatever you charge as a transaction
So you
fee,
need to write 3% of gross price.
plus the 495, right?
How do you describe that? You just say that's a, what's the BAC stand for? in-
Broker administrative compensation. Yeah, right, whatever, just quite honestly, and I will say this. I was so hesitant for so many years, and I, you know, Linda haven't eat her words. I swore that I would never charge that. I knew a lot of agents were, and I just swore I never would. Well, now I do. Right, so never say never, right? But I have yet to have anyone question me on it. No one has ever said a word to me about it.
Yeah.
I was so worried about that.
Yeah, but. it's
No.
just kind of-
No.
Well, the common across the industry too, like.
Pretty common.
Pretty much. everyone.
Yes, pretty much everyone does. And I do know that some agents have had some people kind of, but I never have. I can say that. So
So it covers fee, like office fee.
it covers administrative costs is what I would say if anybody ever did question me on that, right? It's a fee that my broker charges me to cover their administrative costs. And and quite honestly, if anybody ever gave me any serious kickback about that, I would absorb it myself. I would say, okay, I'll take that on.
If they were really, yeah.
Yeah, I don't like
It's not
constant.
for including the.
Exactly,
But it
exactly.
added up.
Yes, it does add up. Yes.
What made you change your mind?
Oh, because I'm on see, that's the thing when I said, I think most of you are probably on this. The KW and KC Metro offers two different kinds of compensation plans. I don't think you were eligible when you're in launch for the one that I'm on, but once you're off launch, you will be, where it's a different split. But they charge me the 495.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
All right. And so when I decided to go on that split is when I started passing it along. Okay. Okay, on a buyer side, I can't really imagine what other compensation is. I see it more, I can understand it more on a listing. If you've got, you know, extra advertising expenses that the seller has offered, or you've asked and the seller has agreed to compensate you for. So on a buyer side, I don't really know what other compensation would be. So if you think you run across something, come talk to me about it, or talk to Kristen or Lynn or your coach. Okay. Line 83, buyer may seek an agreement from the seller equal to the amount. A seller may, but is not required to, offer compensation to buyer's broker. If said compensation cannot be obtained from seller, buyer agrees to either pay all of the balance of the agreed amount at the closing of the transaction, or forego the purchase of said property, right? So basically, that whole part of that paragraph is saying, buyer, this is what I expect to get paid. I will try to find that from other sources. If I can't, you're the one responsible and it will come out at closing. I'm not asking for a separate check from you. It will come out of your funds at closing. If you are not willing to pay that, I can't get it from the seller, you're not willing to pay that, you're not gonna buy that particular property. All right, this was in bold on line 88. Buyer understands and agrees that broker may be compensated by more than one party in the transaction. However, broker is prohibited from receiving compensation for brokerage services that exceed the amount of compensation in this agreement. Buyer hereby authorizes the party handling the closing to pay compensation to broker from buyer's funds at closing if applicable. All right. So if I put 2% in here, trying to make things easy for my buyer, and I find out on this particular listing that that seller will be paying, or the broker will be sharing 3% compensation with my broker, then I have reached this agreement, right? I'm receiving more than I'm asking for. Can't do that. So can we change that? Of course we can, right? And again, change form, I just change this agreement to say 3%, right?
But you can always receive less. What I've heard talk is that.
Exactly.
Write it for more, I mean.
Exactly, right. We can always receive less. So put 4% in here, right? And then if you are offered 3%, we can always receive less and not make any changes to our agreement.
But I guess you put 2% for buyer adamant about. I don't wanna have to pay this
Correct.
3%.
Correct. Exactly. Yep. Yes. So yeah, if you do want to make it sound a little more palatable to your buyer, or, you know, first time home buyer that's, you know, done really great just to scrape together their down payment on something. Yes, I would, you know, I would say, let's put 2% in here. You know, if I end up getting more, we'll change it if that's okay with you.
You can change it. Okay, yeah.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Retainer additional compensation, so on line 94, retainer additional compensation addendum attached, check if applicable. That is a whole other form that says we are collecting money up front from you, buyer. We don't have to include that with this agreement. But if you do, it's available. We would check this box. And that agreement says, you know, within a few days or a certain period of time, or then there's another. And if I'm going to charge a retainer, I'm going to want it up front. So, you know, that's would be, and we probably won't get to that form today because it's already to tell. All right. Line 96, the broker's fee shall be deemed earned if buyer or any person on buyer's behalf procures any real property of the nature described herein within blank calendar days after termination of this contract, which property broker's licensee or cooperating brokers presented or submitted to buyer during the term hereof, and the description of which broker shall have submitted in writing to buyer, either in person or by mail within blank calendar days after termination of this contract. This is our protected period clause for the buyer's side. I think I talked on Monday about our protected period clause on the seller side, on the listing side. If a buyer comes and the buyer and seller kind of circumvent us to save the commission, and they agree to a purchase after our listing expires. Same thing happens here. We have our protected period clause on the buyer side. And this is saying that buyer, if I introduced you to a property and then you wait until this agreement expires and then go buy that property, you still owe me a commission. All right. But again, some things here that we have to fill in. We have to fill, if there's a blank, Missouri requires that, which again, I'm kind of surprised here that they didn't have a default here. Missouri requires us to have every blank filled in. And so I'm going to answer the way I know Lynn answers this question. On line 97, how long do we want our protected period to be? That's what that first blank is on line 97. How long do we want to prevent that buyer from doing that without paying our commission? Lynn would say, I don't care. How long do you want to pursue them? Because the broker's not going to pursue them. That's going to be you. And how are you going to do that on a buyer's side? Right? It's really my question. So I'm not telling you that this is the way you should do it. But back in the day when, and I still do it, if I'm writing up a listing agreement and a buyer agency agreement, I put 0 in there. And I make a big deal about putting a 0 in there. And I tell the buyer, I'm putting 0 in here because I know you wouldn't do that to me anyway. You know, you're telling them what you're protecting yourself about. I know you wouldn't do that. If you decide you really like that house, you'll come back to me. I know that. Okay. So that's the first blank on 97 is how long our protected period is. On line 100, that we have to, what this is saying is that blank there is this is saying we have to provide to the buyer a list of properties that we want protected by the protected period clause. If we have properties listed on our buyer aid on the top of this agreement, then I would give them a list of those listed properties. If I have general location and we had 5 properties that they seem kind of interested in, all right, I wouldn't go to the trouble of listing out every property I showed them, but anything they showed an interest in, I certainly would, but I have to give them that list and say, these are the houses that if you decide you're going to go back after our agreement is ended, that if you decide you're going to buy them, you still owe me a commission.
Sounds like a lot of work.
It does seem like a lot of work, right? On our listing agreement, it says we have to give the seller that list before the listing expires. Here, that doesn't say after termination of this listing. I'm going to go back to them a day after it's expired and said, oh, by the way,
You need to have that.
yeah,
I think it-
that doesn't seem,
work out. You probably don't wanna work.
I feel like you have to chase
there's
them.
that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that doesn't seem to me like it has many teeth to it. It's like,
Yeah.
by the way, after the fact, I'm telling you.
Yeah. So
Okay.
is it? Probably should be 0.
I put 0, I do, right, so if I put 0 on line 97, then I don't have to worry about getting them a list because it doesn't pertain to anything. Yeah. I'm not telling you to put 0. You do whatever you feel comfortable with. I can see it. I think it's easier on a listing because you can drive by that listing every day and see, you know, if they're moving. But on a buyer, I'm going to be calling them, you know, so yeah, right. That's exactly right. That's really kind of the way I look at it. If I wasn't able to do my job in the period of time they gave me, then fine, I'll move on.
This might be for another day, but for listing, so how does it work with expired? Say I wanted to work with expired, but that listing agreement ended, and they have X amount of days. I come in, I sign them under an agency, I sell it, who gets that commission?
You do.
If it's during. that-
You do, because if we list with it, in the listing, it says that our protected period goes away if they list with another broker.
Okay, I was like, that was,
It's very clear on that.
okay.
Good question. Yeah, this is a smart group. You all are coming up with great questions. All right. Okay. However, then we have 102, buyers shall be released and relieved of any obligations to pay the broker's fees described herein, if through no fault on the part of the buyer, the seller fails to close the transaction. So if the seller is the one that defaults, the buyer is not obligated, right? Okay, because really, we didn't do our job, right? We didn't procure them a property that they could close on. All right. Continuing on line 103, this provision shall not, however, relieve the seller of any obligation to pay such fees as may be applicable. That's a whole different conversation we'll have another time. If such transaction fails to close because of any breach of the sale contract on the part of the buyer, broker's fees will not be waived, but will be due and payable to the buyer by the buyer immediately. So if the seller's the one that defaults, we don't expect the buyer to pay us. If the buyer's defaulting, again, they have lots of legitimate reasons to cancel a contract through our contract. And that we don't expect to get paid for. But if they just change their mind, decide that they spent too much, they get cold feet, right? They just decide to default on the contract, then we do still expect our payment.
3%.
Whatever it says up there, right? Right, whatever it says up there. A lot of times when that kind of situation happens, if we've had a lot of really good success, you know, maybe not getting the full compensation, but well, here are my actual expenses on this. And if you don't mind just reimbursing me for those, right? We've had some good results from that. Okay, non-assignment of contract. Paragraph number 11, buyer and broker understand and agree that the relationship created by this agreement is a personal contract and that neither buyer nor broker shall have the right to assign this agreement to third parties. Our agency agreements and then transaction broker agreements are all personal services agreements. They are contracts, and most contracts are assignable, except personal services agreements are not. This is a personal decision that Jody made to work with that buyer or Laura made to work with that seller, right? The personal and that seller and buyer agreed to work personally with you, even though everything's in the broker's name. But so what this says is, so if our brokerage decided to merge with another brokerage, oh gosh, because this happened, just at the end of last year. When the Plaza office when we decided to merge the Plaza office with this office and become KW and KC Metro, those listing agreements couldn't automatically be absorbed, and buyer agency agreements couldn't automatically be absorbed here because it's not transferable, right? They had to be canceled and then relisted with the new broker. So the same thing with the buyer. If they decide, well, I don't want to buy, but my cousin Billy Bob wants to, so I'm just going to sign, we can't do that in this agreement. Now in our contract, with the written consent of all parties, they can do that, but not our agreements. Paragraph number 12, franchise disclosure in our customized forms, internal forms. This will be pre-printed for us. We don't have to check the box, but using this box, you will have to check the box on line 111. Broker is a member of a franchise and pursuant to the terms of its franchise agreement, the franchisor, in our case, that's Keller Williams International, has no legal liability for the actions of the broker, despite its use of franchisor's trade or insignia. So basically saying, buyer, if you have a problem and you want to sue somebody, Keller Williams International is not on the list of people that you can sue. You can sue the broker, but not the franchisor. No, that's always been in there, always. And it's in our agency agreements and it's in our contract. Legal and professional advice, again, has always been in all of our agreements. Buyer shall seek legal, tax, and other professional advice relative to any real estate transaction, because we don't know anything about those things, right? We're not attorneys, we're not tax people, we are not inspectors, we're not structural engineers, right? Broker makes no representation or warranty respecting the advisability of any transaction. Broker is, hey, is this a good deal? Should I buy this house? Oh gosh, I don't know.
What do you say though? Like, how do you tell them? I thought they look at that. That's great.
Oh, Laura, you are so right. The two things that are the hardest things. So that is like, well, should I buy this house? Linda, what do you think?
Yeah.
Well, based on what you've told me and based on the information that I've been able to glean, if you get it at this price, right? Because the numbers tell us historically this neighborhood has done this, right? So just, make sure that you are giving, again, all factual information, right? I don't know if it's the right time for you to buy a house or not, right? I don't know the ins and outs of your personal life. Yeah, always. Yep. Yes, always. So that's the number one hardest thing to, here's the thing. Now, sometimes I do. I mean, I get kind of close to it sometimes. I have told buyers I didn't think it was a good idea. And in fact, one of the things that I tell almost every buyer that I start working with is, okay, so here's the deal. When you find the house that you really love and you want to write an offer on, I'm going to start acting like I don't want you to buy the house. It's going to sound like I don't want you to buy it, because I'm going to start pointing out all of the things that are wrong with this transaction, with this house. Because in my head, where I go buyer is when you call me in 7 years to list this property because you're ready to move on, I'm going to know the problems then, and I want to know them now. Right. So, oh, well, it's you're hearing the traffic over there. There's kind of, are you okay with that? There's a slope in the backyard that may eventually, I know there's a French drain now, but those break down, may get water in your basement.
They're gonna back out. I guess. Lose the, oh no, let me go find mine. But you don't wanna to buy something and then have a regret.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I would much rather them back out of something now because of something like that. Again, factual stuff,
Yeah.
right? And they are based, I mean, that is my advice and counsel. right? So I'd much rather than back out now and we go find another property than they drag me into a lawsuit, 6 months from now because
Yeah.
I didn't say anything about it.
Right, that's a lot. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Line 117, broker is not an expert in matters relating to law, tax, financing, surveying, structural or mechanical condition, hazardous material, engineering, or other specialized topics. Buyer is encouraged to seek expert help in such areas. Broker will cooperate with experts engaged by buyer, but broker shall have no liability to buyers pertaining to such matters. All right, so let me talk about that here for just a second too. So my advice is always, because again, I consider myself a source of information. I want to be that connector. So when you say to the buyer, so what, they're under contract, and so what inspector do you want to use? That number one, you're either going to get, like a blank look. I have no idea what you're saying to me. So, okay, great. Here's a list of 3 to 5. And I think I've got 5 on our list right now. And then again, that's, well, Linda, which one would you use? I would use any of them. That's why they're on my list, right? Now, a lot of times what it boils down to is who can we get when we need them, right? But I've got their phone numbers on there and I've got their websites on there. I said, if we have enough time, you go do, I usually give this list before, it's in my buyer presentation, right? Same thing with lenders, if they haven't already chosen a lender, or even if they have and I don't like them. So you check out these people, look at the different fees that they charge, and all of that. Let's make our decision first, before we get under contract, but sometimes it's also suddenly it also suddenly happens. And so give them that list. But I say that and same thing, if they need an attorney, I depending on what the situation is, if I think it's something I'm going to get drawn into, I say, oh, you need to go find an attorney, right? And I won't even give any.
Just to interrupt you.
That's all right.
Just letting you guys,
It's always good when Brett interrupts contracts class.
even contracts class.
Yeah. And I'm training on the new form.
Oh, look at you. I just want to make sure if anybody's here for tech training, I'm in the training.
We'll be done here. Oh, it's already past time. All right. All right. We're almost done here. So, but what was my thought?
Having a list of.
Oh, yeah. Lynn says not even to do that for inspectors.
Not given a list.
Uh-huh.
Let them go out and find.
Uh-huh. She said, when they ask her, and this is our broker saying this, right? When they ask her, she says, well, I don't know, who'd your parents use? Or didn't you you just had some friends that just bought some, who did they use? So Lynn won't even give a list. I'm not quite that, I do give lists because that's what my role in life, I think, is to connect people, right? And so if I happen to sell some real estate along the way, that's great. All right. So, all right. Paragraph number 14, entire agreement. This agreement constitutes the entire agreement between the parties, and in prior agreements pertaining thereto, whether oral or written, have been merged and integrated into this agreement. There shall be no modification of any of the terms of this agreement unless that modification has been agreed to in writing and signed by all parties. Cyber protection, I think this has been in all of our documents for a couple of years now. I think it's an important conversation to have with all buyers and sellers, just reminding them that we are in a dangerous world. Cyber hackers have gotten very, very, very sophisticated, and we are one of the most hacked industries out there because of all of the money that's changing hands here. Once you get an email address associated with real estate, you will start getting those that look like legitimate emails coming from title companies and from lenders. Oh, here, click here for wiring instructions, or give us your wiring instructions. So just make sure you are having that conversation with all buyers and sellers. If they have any question about any email that they receive, we would all have them, don't call the number that's in the email, call a trusted phone number. Right, and see it and ask if it's legitimate. We would all across the industry rather field 50 phone calls a day about that than have one person subjected to losing their money. So, all right, any additional terms and conditions, and if any, for buyers, it would usually be limiting, maybe excluding a property from this if there is a for sale by owner out there that they found on their own before this agreement that they want excluded. if we're doing a general, again, usually we would put specific addresses in here when we, rather than, you know, we'd say Kansas City Metro, but then we would narrow it down to the 3 addresses we were getting protection on here. So there are some things here. If you want special terms, if you think you want some, or if the buyer wants some, come talk to your coach or me or Kristen about that. So, all right, then we have our legal disclosure there at the bottom of that. Then our electronic disclosure, brokerage name, you'll have to print that in again as KWNKC, KWN Kansas City Metro LLC. You will be signing on line 147, I guess that is. All buyers sign over there. Please, please, please make sure that you get some contact information for the buyer, the address, the phone number, and email. If you can get all 3, that's great. It's important because if you become incapacitated, this is how the broker can get in contact with them. You know, we can always go to this form. So make sure that you're providing at least one of those, if not all 3, please. All right, we got through one form today. Woohoo! And I kept you too late. So yeah, those of you, and even on Zoom, just to let everybody know, everybody here personally, Brett does the on Wednesdays, he does I think it's Command and loop, I think, is kind of what he does.
Command and compliance.
Yeah, command and compliance. So, yep. So everybody should attend that so that you know how to integrate all of that stuff into your business. Then also I'll give him a plug for Thursday afternoons. He does general tech stuff. I think that's from 2 to 3:30 these days. And sometimes he has certain topics on there. Sometimes it's a workshop. Sometimes it's an open-ended, you know, whatever questions you have, but he also does all of these on Zoom as well. So those of you on Zoom that can attend, do that. And those of you that are seeing this later on Facebook, let me know if you have any questions. Text me at 913-219-2289. I respond quicker to text than I do to emails typically. So, all right, that's it. Thanks for everyone joining me today. Those of you in person, and Autumn and Olgie, there, I'll double check to make sure I don't have any other questions that came up.
Thank you so
Nope,
much.
that was the last one. So, all right. Those of you that are planning on going this afternoon, I expect a full report. And so, all right, I will see everyone later. Bye.
Thank you so much.